Hey, Hutto Bible Church, Pastor Trey here. I'm excited to lead us through our devotional this morning. We are continuing in our reading through the book of Psalms as we seek to read through the whole Bible in a year. And so this morning we're in Psalm 76 and Psalm 77. And so if you haven't taken the time to read those two Psalms for yourself yet, just go ahead and press pause, go and read them, and then come back to this. I think that would be to your benefit, and if you have, we can keep going. Now, what I want to do is just spend more time on Psalm 77 than on 76, although I do want to still touch on 76 because as I was reading through these two Psalms this morning in my own quiet time, I got the sense that these two Psalms were really complementary and that they together reveal two of God's attributes or two of God's characteristics that are also complementary. They're really like two sides of the same coin, if you will. And those two characteristics of God or attributes of God are God's transcendence, which is really that God is bigger than his creation, that he's outside of his creation, that God is different from his creations. And I think that's really Psalm 76 is getting at the greatness of God. And then here's why I love it, because Psalm 77 is the other side of the coin. It's that complementary attribute of God, or at least I saw that being highlighted in my own reading this morning. And that other attribute, the second attribute of God, is the immanence of God, which is that God is near, that God is involved, that he is actively working in and among and through his creation, and specifically in his people in a really unique and intimate way. And so the Bible is going to great lengths, and this morning when I was reading these two Psalms, this is what was coming up, was this idea or this truth that we have a God who is bigger than, who is outside of, who is greater than, who is more powerful than, and who is sovereign over all of his creation, and yet he is also near to us. That even though he's bigger than, he's outside of, he comes close, he draws near, he is intimately involved in every aspect of creation, and specifically, again, intimately involved in the lives of his people. And we see that, I think, in Psalm 77, as Asaph is experiencing turmoil, as he's experiencing trouble in his own life, and I think that's certainly circumstantial, but it's causing some kind of spiritual turmoil. He says in verse 2, he says, "In the day of my trouble I seek the Lord. In the night my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints." And then going down to verses 8 and 9, he says, "Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion?" Right? And so Asaph, as he's walking through this dark night of the soul, if you will, is he recounts crying out to God, and it seems like for a prolonged season, right? I mean, it's this continual crying out, and my soul refuses to be comforted, right? Like his body, his spirit is growing weary and weak and tired. He's asking the question, God, where are you, right? Has God withdrawn his love? Has God shut up his compassion? Is his graciousness no more? Like, where are you in the midst of this season? And I think this is something that many, if not all of us, experience at some point in our own lives, right? This kind of where are you, God, sort of season where whether it's circumstantial or whether it's something else, where we find ourselves crying out for our God to deliver us, to end this, to get us out of this. Maybe that's you right now in this season. God, deliver us, right? Get us out of this pandemic season. Get us out of this shelter-in-place lockdown. Maybe it's something that's existed long before this pandemic began for you. And maybe it's something that, whether you realize it or not, the Lord's going to lead you into in the coming years or months or weeks, like the coming seasons of your life, you'll be walking through these. And in those moments, I think the honest cry of our heart is, God, where are you? Because that's what we're feeling in those moments. And I think that's what Asaph is experiencing as well. And here's what I love, verse 10. Asaph responds, or he gives an appropriate response for those types of cries, right? He says this in verse 10, and then I'm going to read verse 11. He says, "Then I said, I will appeal to the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old." And so in this moment, in this season, this dark night of the soul, if you will, Asaph, as he's recounting this experience where he felt like God was not present, God was not near, he says, how do I respond? Well, I respond by recounting God's faithfulness. I respond by remembering the works of the Lord in the past. I remember his past faithfulness to me, to his people. I remember the ways in which he proved time and time again to be truly who he says he is. The times when he acted consistently with who he said he is. Like I remember all of those times when my God delivered his people. In fact, he says in verse 20 to close Psalm 77, he says, "You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron." Like I remember when my God led us through the wilderness, out of Egypt and through the wilderness into the promised land, how he cared for us and he led us like a shepherd. And so again, this this God who is big, who is outside of creation, who's independent from creation, is near to his people. He's immanent. He's active in a really personal and intimate way. He draws near to us. And here's what I want to leave you with, guys. For all of us, whether you're in this season right now or not, as we reflect on the fact that our God is near, that he draws near, that he is involved in his creation and in the lives of his people, we see that most clearly presented at the cross of Christ and in the incarnation, that God would step down from his heavenly throne, that he would take on human flesh, that he would live a human life, that he would do that to redeem humanity, that he would go to the cross, take our sin upon himself, the sin that was not his, but again, took it on as if it were his own. He would then suffer, die, be buried, and then resurrected gloriously and powerfully. God would do all of that. Why? So that you and I, through faith in Christ, could actually now draw near to him. Right? Our God who is big, our God who is powerful, our God who is also who is transcendent and immanent. He is big and outside of creation and also very intimately active in creation. Our God was so near to us that he took on human flesh to redeem us, to rescue us, and to restore us into a relationship with himself, so that we can now cry out and draw near to our good shepherd, Jesus, because of what he did for us. And so I would just encourage you, whether again you're in one of those seasons now, whether you've been in one of these seasons, these dark nights of the soul, or whether you're doing great and little do you know, maybe one is on the horizon. Regardless, I would encourage you, remember God's faithfulness to you, to me, to his people throughout human history. And if you're wrestling to figure out, well, where has God been faithful? Where has God been the keeper of his promise? Look no further than the cross of Christ, in which he rescues you and me and anyone who would place their faith in Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of their sins, so that we can know him, love him, and enjoy him, and draw near to him today, tomorrow, and for all eternity. This is who our God is. He is big, he is powerful, he is great, and he is near, and he has gone to the greatest of lengths so that you and I can draw near to him. I love you, church. I pray that this blesses you and stirs your affections for Jesus. Blessings.